Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bryce is Right. Tonight, we are discussing the topic of abortion and women's rights, specifically the right to bodily autonomy, which in many ways is being challenged right now with certain laws that are being passed in certain states that essentially make it extremely difficult for women to get an abortion legally. So with that in mind, I decided I wanted to put together a panel tonight, a great panel, if I don't say so myself, to discuss this topic. And really, I'd like to stress that for the benefit of the viewers, this isn't a debate. This isn't intended to be a debate on pro-life or pro-choice. This isn't that. This is a group of people getting together and expressing their opinion. I do think that there's a certain time and place for diversity of opinions and arguments for or against abortion, conversations that frankly need to be had because we live in a diverse country. But for this show, I wanted to highlight the opinions of people who could personally have been affected by this, basically people who were born with uteruses. We're going to talk about what motivated the recent changes and look at the religious divide between the pro-life group and those who favor choice. But I definitely wanted it to be a discussion mostly with women who could be pregnant, have been pregnant, could have had an abortion, whatever. And that's not me, and that's not a lot of other people. So with that in mind, let me bring in the guests. My first guest, I think most of you will recognize her from her many appearances on the Atheist Experience. She's also co-hosted the Ethan and Jenna call-in show, which addresses mental health issues. And she is a recent first-time mother. Please welcome Jenna Belk to the show. Jenna, welcome aboard.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me.
I'm so happy to have you. I am just as happy to have a fellow ACA person from the nonprofits, Miss Jenna Miyu. And she's going to be joining us as well. Jenna, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me, Bryce.
I think this is your first time, both of you actually, this is your first time on my show, isn't it?
It is.
I am very excited. I hope you guys are excited.
I'm excited. You got double the Jenna. So
I was going to say.
I do. Jenna and Jenna, it's going to be amazing. And someone whose first time, this is definitely not their first time on the show, she was on my first live show, is Cynthia McDonald, also co-host of the nonprofit. Cynthia, come on down. Welcome back.
I bet $1.
I'm really happy to have you back because you were a fan favorite from my first live show.
Aw,
so thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I can't wait to have this discussion.
Yeah, awesome. And you know what? In anticipation that religion could come up or that the Bible might possibly come up in this discussion, I thought of calling on one of our resident Old Testament experts. At least she's an expert to me, Miss Biddy Buddha, fellow Tang resident here, who might educate us specifically on what some of the theistic objections might be and whether they're valid or not. So Biddy, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but
you know what? Everything is relative, right? Right? You may not be an expert compared to a 90-year-old Jewish scholar who's done this all his life, but compared to me, expertise. And last but certainly not least is our very own Sunny Shell, who is returning to us after a period of moving and house hunting and getting settled. Sunny, welcome back to The Bryce is Right.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be back. And let me just say that your very first show with Cynthia, I have to second what you said because I was so into that. And Cynthia, you were fantastic. I'm so thrilled to be on a show with you.
Oh, I'm blessed.
Yes, and we are thrilled. We are thrilled to have you back. Welcome back. This is your second home or your home away from home.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So before we get started, though, I want to state my opinion on the topic. I want to state my opinion first, and then I kind of want to take a hands-off approach because I think people need to hear a diversity of opinions. I personally would like to listen to a public conversation on this issue from members of the affected community, which is the panel, right? So other voices are important. I think all voices from all demographics should be heard, especially because we live in a divided society. And that's why I'm going to offer my opinion now for the record. And then after that, I'm going to give the panel to the floor, and I will just guide the discussion with some questions. So my opinion on abortion is essentially this. In the general sense, I am pro-choice. I used to be pro-life. Back when I was a Christian, I was very much pro-life. I considered abortion a sin. I thought it was immoral. I thought it was killing an innocent life. And then I sort of transitioned to what I like to call pro-choice, but anti-abortion. And in that sense, I disagreed with abortions. I still thought it was wrong, but at the same time, I felt it was wrong for women to have the right to, or to not have the right to control their own bodies. I thought that that was wrong too. And I recognized I'm not a woman. I can't really be in this position. I recognize God is against it, but I have to, from the legal sense, women should have the ability to make that choice themselves. And then finally, I transitioned again to being fully pro-choice. I no longer hold the same views that I did before. Part of that transition involved a learning process, learning more about science, learning more about biology and psychology and philosophy, learning more about the Bible and what it really says about abortion, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But most of all, learning about ethics and morals and rights. So learning changed my views. And I'm hopeful that with better education and just a willingness for people to consider, people who consider themselves open-minded, a willingness of them to listen to other voices, which have traditionally been a silent minority, despite making up over 50% of the population. So I'm hoping that mindsets can be changed the way that mine was. So with that, that's really all I have to say about it. That's the extent of my opinion, and I'm going to open the floor up. I am going to start with some questions, though. I would like to kind of go around the room to see what everyone's position is. So let's start with you, Jenna. I'm just going to go in the this order. Not sure how that's appearing, but Jenna Belk. Pro-life, pro-choice.
Pro-abortion.
Pro-abortion. All right. Does that mean that you are advocating for abortions, or you are just for the right of a woman to have an abortion if she deems that that's necessary for her?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that it is a medical procedure that should be optional to anybody who wants it.
Fair enough. Jenna, Miyu.
I am pro-choice. I've always have been. Certainly have not had that experience myself, but have known family and, of course, patients that I have either closely worked with or not as closely with. So definitely bodily autonomy is important. The medical understanding of what an abortion is and the stages of all of that is important to understand too. So that is my stance on that.
Awesome. Cynthia?
I am pro-choice as well. I do believe in bodily autonomy. I believe that a person should be able to have a medical procedure no matter what it is, as long as it's a choice that they make. And they should not have any state or outside entity telling them whether if they can have this medical procedure or not. I have wavered in the past, being when I in my Christian days. However, I am firmly on this hill that I was going to say die on, but not really. But I have definitely formulated an opinion about, a woman's right to choose. And I think it's a little bit more personal for me because, I've been through, going back and forth if I was going to even make that choice myself. So I definitely feel that is a choice that a person should be able to make without impediment, and it should be a decision between them and their doctor.
Awesome. And thanks a lot for the super chat there, Shane the Skeptic. I agree with the statement. I think most people probably do. Although for some people, their position may be both of those, being pro-abortion and pro-choice. So, Biddy, where do you stand on this?
So I am very new in the pro-choice, pro-abortion for Shane there. This was probably one of the last things I deconstructed, and it came from just having absolutely no knowledge on the topic whatsoever. That once I researched a lot of it, I have since switched positions from pro-life to pro-choice, and I agree with everything Cynthia just said. So there's my position.
Awesome. And Sunny.
So sorry about that. My cat was destroying something and I had to get him out of the room. So
Those pesky cats.
So I am very much pro-choice. I tend to go along with Jenna Belk. I feel like it is a medical procedure that nobody should have a right to infringe upon. It should be HIPAA protected. I mean, I don't know how this is even a discussion because it's a medical procedure. And it should be between a woman and her doctor. It's only a problem because, in my opinion, well, actually, I don't really think it's an opinion. It is a form of oppression against women, but especially African American women in particular. And we can get into that a little bit later. But I read an article about how this is directly related to suppression of people of color. And I thought that was quite interesting. So I want it to be openly available to anyone who needs it. In addition, I'm a woman who has had an abortion. I've also had miscarriages, and I've had babies and grandbabies. And I used to live in Texas. I don't anymore. But I would take my daughter or my granddaughter anywhere across state lines, across the world if I had to get her the help that she needs. But that is a statement of privilege. Not everybody has that ability. So that means that people like me need to speak up for people who are unable to speak up for themselves or have the ability to do what they need to do. So I'm extremely pro-choice. And yes, it doesn't mean that it's pro-abortion, but I am absolutely pro-abortion because I don't think that abortion should be something that's even discussed outside of the medical office with a patient.
Fair enough. And Biddy has kind of already answered this question, but I just want to, for the other people that didn't answer this portion of it anyway, I stated that my position had changed. Biddy indicated that she used to be where I was. We were both theists. I think, Cynthia, you may have mentioned that you waffled as well. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Thank you.
Okay. And how about you, Jenna Belk? You were previously a theist. Did you have a pro-life stance at that point? Very much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was one of those proud to be the woman that was pro-life people.
Wow. So were you picketing in front of abortion clinics, or you weren't bombing abortion clinics, right?
Well, I had family that I found out were picketing at Planned Parenthood, and I wished that I had the opportunity to join them.
Okay. And how about you, Jenna and Miyu?
Yeah, I've always held the same position as I hold now as being pro-choice. Definitely going through nursing school has opened my eyes more and understanding the whole process, even, the ins and outs surrounding the reasonings as why a person would, why a woman, I should say, would want a need to have an abortion. But yes, that position, even as a believer, and when I used to be a believer myself, I never held to the idea that aborting was a wrong idea, even though whatever scripture may have said or whatever my surrounding family who were believers may have said about it and were against it, it never shook my, I guess innate understanding of, well, it's something that a woman is making a decision for her body. And if men have so much opportunity to, you know, make their wieners hard, then why not give more opportunity for women to address their own sexual health and needs too? And that includes, you know, having to go through that tough decision of aborting an embryo.
Right. And how about you, Sunny? I know you used to be a couple of different types of theists, and you've oscillated between religions, but did you always have a pro-choice stance, or were you ever pro-life?
So I don't recall ever being terribly pro-life, but religion had a big role in my life for a long time. And so when I had my abortion, afterwards, I remember feeling very guilty, not because I thought that it was the wrong choice, but because of my faith. And I ended up with a non-denominational church. They had a group for Christian women who had had abortions, and it was a support group. And it was probably one of the most traumatic and awful experiences I've ever been through. And
the support group or the abortion?
Yeah, no, the support group.
Wow. With
the church. And I drove an hour twice a week for about 3 or 4 months to go to this support group. And it was, it was supposed to be where, it was basically where, as a Christian woman, you've made this terrible mistake, but you can ask God for forgiveness. But first you have to atone for what you've done. And one of the things we had to do was name our child and all of these type of things. And we went through this book that they had that was with a workbook. So we had to write down all of these things. And it was absolutely horrific. By the end of it, I couldn't go to the last thing where we had this ceremony for the unborn child and where we would ask for God's forgiveness and all of this stuff. I couldn't go to the last one. It was just too demoralizing for me. And it was after that my faith really started faltering. Although it had faltered a little bit. I mean, we had a discussion about that before, but that particular thing is what sticks out in my mind as being a source of religious trauma. The abortion itself was not as traumatic as the experience with that church and with that supposed support group, because that's not what it was. It was like filleting you open and making you feel like the most horrid person in the world. But then at the end, but God can forgive you if you atone for that. And I think that is one of the worst things, aside from the fact that I did have to walk across the picket line for my abortion as well. Those two things stick out in my mind. The abortion itself, I knew it was the right thing to do, and I've never regretted that decision, except for feeling guilty and starting up with that group. And that's the thing that I feel the most guilty about, is ever feeling like I needed to atone for anything.
Right. Wow. Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but it really highlights the situation that this is probably something a lot of women have to go through. That something that would have never even occurred to me, actually. I hear the word support group, for women who've had abortions, and I'm thinking support. But that sounds like torture.
Yeah.
I do want to kind of get into what motivated me to have this discussion and the new law that's passed. I had a video clip. This is from TYT reporting on a Texas law a couple of days ago. So I'm going to go ahead and play the clip and then ask a question on the flip side of it.
The conservative Supreme Court, which of course includes 3 Supreme Court justices who were nominated and confirmed during the Trump administration, decided against blocking Texas's anti-abortion law, which effectively bans abortions past 6 weeks and encourages private citizens across the country to essentially report on anyone who might be aiding and abetting a woman seeking to have an abortion past 6 weeks. Now, this doesn't mean that the Supreme Court has weighed in on the constitutionality of this law, which just went into effect on September 1st in the state of Texas. However, it does mean that as this case makes its way through the lower courts, there is abortions are illegal. Essentially, 85% of abortions in the state of Texas happen past the 6-week mark. And so you have abortion providers in the state that have canceled appointments. They're being incredibly cautious because they're terrified of these lawsuits being brought against them from private citizens across the country. And so we are in a terrible situation because not only is this impacting women in the state of Texas, this will impact women across the country, particularly in red states, and these efforts are now being duplicated in places like Florida, which we'll get to later in the show.
It's in effect.
Yep.
So it is the law of Texas as we stand now, until a court reverses it. So because what a court could have done is, hey, let's adjudicate this, and we'll tell you if it's constitutional or not. But in the meanwhile, it doesn't go into effect because there's serious questions about its constitutionality, which happens all the time and which is more normal. And in this case, they said, we're not sure, go for it. Let's see how it turns out. And so that's why people are rightfully freaking out, saying that's it. Basically, abortion is now illegal in the state of Texas. And now, of course, as you all know, that's not gonna affect everybody in Texas. Rich people don't care at all. They can just hop on a plane, and they don't have to go to Paris or anything. They can go to a nearby state. So that's pro-choice, and they will. You know they're all hypocrites.
Of course.
You know the right wing gets abortions nonstop, and we've covered those stories before. Some of them will even join the picket line and go get an abortion, and then when you ask them, what the hell did you do? He said, no, it was inconvenient for me, but these people are evil, okay? So the rich Republicans will continue to get abortions to no end in Texas. They always have, and they will going forward. But poor people who can't afford flights out, well, they're stuck. And they now live under religious rule in Texas.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And that's just a fact.
Okay, so a little snark there from the very progressive TYT. I love them. I know not everybody's a fan, but yeah, so that is essentially what has happened in Texas. And I saw you kind of nodding and shaking your head, Sonny, and I know you have thoughts and opinions about that, and I know Cynthia probably does too. So let me go to you, Sonny. What are the implications here for women?
The implications are huge because it's not just about whether a woman decides that she doesn't want to carry to term, which it should even be a question. But what concerns me more as someone who works with children who have been physically and sexually abused are those kids who are 10, 11, 12 years old, who are victims of sexual abuse and end up pregnant. Those are the ones that I'm most concerned about because their brains are not fully developed, their bodies are not fully developed. They are at a much higher risk for all types of issues, including death during delivery, death during pregnancy, because their bodies are not developed. And on top of that, the fact that they have to carry a baby to term and have a baby from someone who violated them. What that ends up doing is creating, let's say that they give it up for adoption. Well, I can tell you that the foster care system is broken and there are far too many kids in the system than there are families able to take them. And I'm not talking about just adoptive families, but families just to house them until they're able to be adopted. This is a huge problem. Let's say they keep the child. How is a 10, 11, 12-year-old who is a victim of child abuse, who most often is taken and put into foster care herself, supposed to support this child? There's so many implications that go far deeper than just should a woman be allowed to carry. And first, let me just say, I shouldn't say woman, I should say someone with a uterus, because we have trans men who can also be experiencing this. So I don't want to leave anyone out. But I'm mostly concerned about these kids because they're not prepared and the system is not prepared. not just for the young ones, but for teenagers, for young women, anyone who finds himself in this situation. It's going to be a huge drag on our entire economic system. They're creating a problem that they're not even thinking about. All they're thinking about is controlling people's choice and keeping people down. That's all that they're thinking about. They're thinking about their own power, and they're not thinking about all of the other implications that come along with it.
Cynthia, Sunny mentioned a little while ago her belief about how this is adversely affecting women of color, and I think I saw you nod at that point as well. Did you want to piggyback on that?
Sure. And actually, like, when we first was talking about this, before I even did like my cursory research concerning about like how it could possibly affect women who happen to be part of minority groups, Black women in particular. When you have, like, first off, and this is before I even did all that, but even before you think about access, the healthcare system in of itself is poorly set up to assist women that come from minority groups, especially Black women. We still have an issue when it comes to how providers think, Black patients have a threshold of pain versus white patients. We even still have an issue of access to proper medical care in certain, even like African American communities. So access is a big thing. And then also, like, when you look at wealth share and in these particular communities, it's very small. So sometimes these decisions to even have an abortion has a lot to do with, can I even afford the kid? No matter, even if like you can get like services like welfare or Medicaid or things of that nature, they only go so far. And I'm pretty sure that those who have who have children on this panel know that children are extremely expensive. So when you are introducing a bill like this, and you have a disproportionate portion of your population that's within poverty, not even like including like the federal poverty line, just like, people who don't necessarily have historically access resources, things that you need in order for you to be socially viable, it's going to hurt them tremendously. Not even keeping in mind the whole thing, like, Anna from TYT mentioning, or I don't know if it was Anna or I keep on forgetting. I can see his name.
Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian.
Yes, Cenk Uygur. Yes. Not even to mention, like, if you have like, money that's more disposable income, you can go to a plane and go to an out of state facility and have this performed. However, what happens when you don't have like resources like that? What happens when you are not necessarily a person that is adjacent to wealth in any means, and you're needing this procedure? Because even like what Sunny even mentioned previously about, I believe that you mentioned previously about, like, children possibly being violated, young people being violated, like be it by rape or what have you, incest, what have you. And the law doesn't even consider a woman or a person with a uterus that has been violated by rape or incest. So another thing, that you're taking away the person's choice to be able to, utilize a medical procedure to help quell their trauma. I mean, these people who have actually drafted this bill and voted into law have no consideration for any of these things, and how they can disproportionately affect a community of people who are already marginalized and historically oppressed. And so, yes, this is definitely going to be a law that's going to affect these communities adversely. And And to even have like the justice system, specifically the Supreme Court, to say we're not going to, adjudicate the law right now so that we can review it. We're just going to let it happen willy-nilly, and then we'll get to it when we get to it. I'm think about like all the people that's going to be affected until you decide that you're going to get to it. And even if you happen to look at any case that is picked up by the Supreme Court, it still takes months for any type of decision to come down, whether they consider a law unconstitutional or not. So what do they do and then?
Yeah, and I think at this point, the way that it is now, since they've refused to rule on the constitutionality of it, basically it's illegal, and then it has to go up through the court system, which takes months and months, years. It's going to be illegal in Texas essentially for years, unless the Supreme Court just decides to step in, which they're not going to do because it's a conservative majority, it looks like. Jenna, Miyu, you work in the medical field. This isn't exactly your area, but you already mentioned, being aware of people coming in for abortions. Do you have any knowledge of what if it's disproportionately people of color, or if it's about 50-50, or if it's mostly, do you have any sense of like the demographics there?
Certainly. I mean, obviously, without even just determining to Black women, and minority groups in general are disproportionately affected, but it's more aggressively so with Black women. And I don't know the hard statistics or the numbers surrounding that, but knowing the aspects of having this type of decision being removed for a person that has a uterus is detrimental, because they're hit on all other sides before they even make this final choice, because getting an abortion is viewed as the ultimate last extreme choice that a person has to make for their well-being. There's certainly other things that fall before that. You have better protection, better health educated individuals that know how to use contraceptive devices, that receive that appropriate education in school and in public health communities overall. But when you don't have that immediate access or that go-to, or you are, your learning stems from some religious bias where the understanding is you just don't have sex until you're married, that's damaging, because you're just removing or telling said person to not perform this action, ergo you won't get pregnant. But that's not always the case. That happens. So what do you do when that person is just left with no general understanding or no health education to fall back on? How can they appropriately protect themselves? And then on the other end, after that person is forced to have said child, these politicians don't support them on that side either. They purposely remove, after school programs or food, WIC support, removing that funding, and everything else that follows, and trying to support a child, even with trying to support a child having a child. And, the aspects of understanding how to appropriately utilize contraceptives. Hell, their main attack has always just been to remove Planned Parenthood. But Planned Parenthood and other clinics that perform abortions do so much more than just perform abortions, right? They advise that appropriate education as far as appropriate sexual health. So, I mean, just to take a birth control pill is not just to prevent you from getting pregnant. That helps for a woman to regulate menstrual cycles. It helps regulate your hormones, because, women don't all have the same periods.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jenna,
right,
but Planned Parenthood, if I'm not mistaken, the vast majority of their resources are devoted to things like that and not abortions, right? It's like a misconception that they're for abortions. Very little, and no federal funding ever went to abortions, even from Planned Parenthood, right?
Yeah,
that was just Like that's like when I heard that the whole controversy of Planned Parenthood, I looked a lot of this up, and it seems to me like it's just religious people who don't want women having sex who are not married.
Right. And that touches on something when I was reading an article and kind of, relied on my experience as far as, detecting fetal heartbeats and things like that. So not many people know that when you do initially go in, and this article touched it beautifully, and I recalled this in my own education, when you do go in, when a person goes in to, get the sense of, how the baby's doing, to test for a fetal heartbeat, basically. So that sound that a person hears, and I believe there has been a law in one of the states, one of these backward states, that
Mississippi.
There you go. Forcing women to listen to the heartbeat of their child within them. And then ultimately that emotional response could sway them not to abort, which is bullshit. So what you're hearing is not that embryo's heartbeat, because at that point in time, okay, let's just take the 5-week, demand that they're enforcing this. At 5 weeks, that's not a fetus, that's an embryo. Fetus is just used the wrong and inappropriate way in this law, because when we think of a fetus, you think of a fairly shaped, smaller, super smaller version of Jenna Belk's baby right now. But an embryo, that looks like a mishmash of something you maybe find in a trash can or something, just to give you some kind of vivid idea. So when you're listening to that embryonic response through that ultrasound, that's not a heartbeat. Those electrical activity is giving off the sense of something that's there, but the sound is what the ultrasound is giving off. The sound is the ultrasound, not the actual heartbeat. It's just the electrical activity is causing that ultrasound to make that sound. So the whole purpose or drive for these evangelical conservatives wanting to force women to listen to their baby's heartbeat is wrong. And it's purely out of religious bias.
Wow. So there was a comment here. This is not let me go to this comment. Sorry. This is a High Inquisitor. Texas will be the first state to start enforcing homosexuality laws on the books, which is an interesting comment. Possibly slippery slope, but I don't know, Jenna Belk, you live in Texas. What do you think is the general sense there, just from the overall population and women? Like, have you kind of talked to anyone about this? Do you know what they think in Texas about this?
From the people that I know, I, for the most part, hang in pro-choice groups. So my people are not exactly happy. But as for certain people that I don't necessarily hang out with, that I know of from here, I mean, so this is how I used to view it. I used to believe, well, what's the definition of murder? The ending of a human life. And I was like, oh, well, this is by definition the ending of a human life. So I was like, well, by definition, it's murder then. So that's just good enough for me. Till I started learning more about the whole, they give you the image of a baby and say, this is what, no, that's not what you're doing. But I mean, I'm not even one of the most extreme scenarios that these women are bringing up. I'm one of just those average people that this is affecting. I'm just one of those people. I have a baby. I am married. Why would it apply to me? Well, for example, I was talking to a family member about how I don't know if I want to have a second child. And they said, oh, well, give it some time. Okay, that's not a decision I want to make emotionally. That's not a decision I want to make on a whim. That's not something that anybody else should make for me. If I do get pregnant again, I deserve, and that child deserves, for me to want that child and be able to support that child as much as this one. So I'm actually a little afraid right now, because if I do get pregnant, and if for some reason we decide we couldn't take care of it, which looking at it, it doesn't look like I could right now anyway, I would have to depend on family to get me out of this state to try to take care of it. And I'm still paying off medical bills from having him. Getting help from family with that, because I couldn't even afford that. So I'm pretty nervous. I did just have a doctor's appointment, and I was very strongly recommended to get on birth control. So
yeah,
we still have that legal.
Yeah, and Sunny kind of touched on that, the financial burden that that people could find themselves in, whether you know more than anybody, you just had a kid. So I'm sure you see the difference in what your lifestyle is now versus what it was before. I chose not to have, I couldn't get pregnant, but just for me and my partner, we didn't want kids. And people look at us like, why don't you want kids? You're supposed to have, like, it's the normal thing that you're supposed to eventually have kids, and you're not normal if you decide not to. I have other things to do. I like kids. They're okay. I like other people's kids, but not everybody has to have a kid. Not everybody has to have more than one. And it's super presumptuous of someone to say to you, oh, just wait until later. Wait until you change your mind. Like, that's just a given.
Well, and something that I think that speaks to is, another fellow Texas uterus owner and I have talked about. When I first got pregnant with this one, I was very excited very early. And I had been one of those people that talked about how abortion equates killing, germs, right? Mm-hmm. And this friend of mine got kind of offended because of her past experiences with miscarriages. But she was confused as to how I could possibly care that much about this germ, as I referred to it before I got pregnant. And the thing is that, and this is what I would tell anybody that had those thoughts, which I'm sure there's plenty of people that do. I was planning and hoping for what I was anticipating. I was excited and am grateful and was, for thinking about what he was going to be, what he is going to be. I don't know how I would feel if I had a miscarriage. I've never had one, but I do know that if I needed to, I could do an abortion. And again, that's baffling to so many people that I know, that I can possibly say that with a baby, with him even in my arms. But one of the reasons that I'm okay with having him in my arms during this is because I don't think that should change the circumstance. That doesn't change my answer.
So there's that. I know that you had a little bit of hesitation about appearing on the show because you were doing your motherly, you were on babysitting detail tonight. But we talked about it, and I was like, no, you come on the show. We want to see the motherly duties, and we want to hear the opinion of a mother who's doing motherly duties about abortion. I think that's totally fair and appropriate and helpful. I want to show another clip here, basically from the same show, that touches a little bit on the religious implications, and then I want to ask Biddy a question on the flip side of that. So let's hear Jink and Anna sound off again.
When the Supreme Court weighed in on abortion in the, of course, Roe v. Wade case, the whole argument was about the viability of the fetus outside the womb, right? What is life? And if a fetus is dependent on a woman in order to live, right? Is it really a human life? And I would argue no, right? If it's not viable outside the womb, it's not a baby, okay? And what we're talking about here, we're not even having a discussion about a fetus. It's not even considered a fetus until you hit the 8-week mark. It's considered an embryo. So we're having a debate about embryos right now, as tens of thousands of Texans have died in the state over the last year, that's what it looks like at 7 weeks. Is that viable outside the womb? Is that the same thing as a human life? I would argue, no, it is not. But if you're a religious person and you believe that it is, that organism is the same thing as a living, breathing human being, then by all means, don't have an abortion. But your religious views should not dictate the laws of the land. We're supposed to live in a country that separates church and state.
We can draw the line anywhere, right? And we can have a debate about where to draw the line. Anna pointed out the reasonable place to draw it, in our opinion, is when life becomes independent. Well, that means it's an independent human being, okay? And has its rights. But as long as it's dependent, whether it's your semen or it's an embryo, it obviously doesn't have full rights, to say the least. And that's why Roe versus Wade is not having abortion at any time. You know that it says at viability, basically the 3rd trimester, you're not allowed to have an abortion, because at that point it's an independent life. So the rest of it is religious views. Oh, well, I know, but the Bible says this. First of all, as always, let me just say, the Bible doesn't even say that. And if you don't even believe the Bible, because if you did, the Bible agrees with me. And so now let me give you our non-religious perspective. I don't think abortion is a big deal. Oh my God, you're not allowed to say that in America. We live among religious zealots, and the Taliban will be so upset if you say that. I don't care what the Taliban thinks, whether they're in Kandahar or in Texas. Oh, you're supposed to view that as sacred. Why? It's not my Bible. I don't believe in your religion. No, you have to think like I do. Well, I don't. I don't think abortion is a big deal at all. At all. Well, I'm offended. Well, I don't care that you're offended. You're allowed to be offended. It's a free country. But what you're not allowed to do is pass laws where you enforce your views on us.
I chuckle at that. I think that they're funny, but not everybody's cup of tea, but relevant to this topic. And kind of touched on what you were saying before, Jenna, Miyu, about viability and the at the 5th week you were talking about, and then he said at 8 weeks is when it becomes, I think Anna said that it goes from being a embryo to a fetus. But yeah, the law is 6 weeks, you know? So just, it seems like religion to me. And what do you think about that, Biddy? I mean, can you think of any secular arguments? But before you answer that, let me give a shout out to Aunt Kathy, who just gave us $10 because she is such a fan of you guys. Also on the pro birth control for males and females. Yeah, I don't know about that. One of you is going to have to educate me about that. Birth control, is there such a thing as male birth control? Anybody?
Yes.
There is. Like, is it a pill or I mean, I know condoms, but.
There's also vasectomies.
Vasectomy, there you go. Yeah, of course.
That's it.
Yeah.
And there was male birth control in pill form, and they ended up doing away with it because of the side effects, which are the same side effects that women face by taking birth control.
Oh no, you mean I have to deal with side effects? No, we can't have that. That should only be for
can't
women.
have that for the menses.
No,
Yeah.
but I do want to answer her question because birth control, costs money. It's not something that everybody can get. B, there's many states who have tried to regulate that as well and keep women. For instance, my daughter, she's on birth control, not for prevention of birth. You know, having a baby. She's only 15. She's not sexually active yet. However, she has terrible periods and terrible, not PMS, but the other one, the worst one. Anyway, I can't think of what it's called right now. It was right there and it went away. Anyway, we're having a hard time getting it refilled because our insurance changed. And all of a sudden, in 1 month, it went off the chain. And so we're working to make that happen. It's not accessible to everybody. There's also side effects. Not every woman female can handle those types of things. There are many different types of birth control. It's not something that is, it's just not an easy thing. It's not something that's just super simple. And the religious right has fought against, with Obamacare, allowing for women to have free birth control. They don't want us to have abortions. They don't want us to have sex, period. That's really what the bottom line is. And then take into effect that birth control fails. It's not 100% effective, but especially condoms. So yes, let's protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves not just from unwanted pregnancies, but from STDs. And we need to be careful. We need to be responsible. We need to think, not because of sex being a bad thing or something like that, but because we only have one life, and it can be easily affected. And so, yes, I'm all about having contraceptives, but it's not like, hey, well, let's just make everybody have. You should have just put an aspirin between your knees, like they've said in the past. It's not that simple. We need to have multiple choices here, including access to healthcare and healthcare for women's reproductive rights. Period.
Right.
End of discussion. The whole ball and chain.
I also just wanted to piggyback real quick before Biddy, you jump in concerning insurance. How insurance is regulated, especially when it comes to prescriptions and birth control, varies from state to state. Some states will actually be able to include, depending on the type of insurance that you have, to cover birth control, especially if you utilize it for other medical practices, like, controlling periods. I know I was on progesterone for a very long time. And basically progesterone is a hormone that can also be used as birth control in order to regulate periods if a person happens to bleed heavily and also have other side effects from having periods. So if I happen to be in a state where insurance was not going to allow or have an employer that, if they were faith-based, because this is an issue that was happening too with the Affordable Care Act, if faith-based organizations who had employees wanted decided that they don't want to cover birth control, any type of birth control pill, even if it's deemed classified as such, even if a person is not necessarily getting it for that purpose, they don't have to cover it. So again, this is another overarching issue when it comes to even helping to help regulate women's healthcare.
Biddy, does this seem like a religious law to you, or does it seem like there's any secular basis for this?
Okay, so scripturally speaking, they can't ground their position within the Bible itself. The Bible designates life all throughout it at the breath of life, the first breath, when the baby is officially born. Going back to like incest and stuff like that, that's obviously cursed. In Numbers, it specifically talks about a potion that the priest would give a woman that was brought to him by her husband. If she was found unfaithful, her belly would swell and it would cause her thigh to rot. And thigh is a euphemism for your reproductive organs. So basically, if that child within the womb was from another man, which could go back into like being raped, incest. So even in the Bible, there was an out for that. It would cause the baby to miscarry. And like there's also in Exodus and Leviticus, you have if it's a life for a life sort of punishment. And so if a woman falls down and the baby is fine, a man is to pay a fine. If the baby were to die, or if the baby were to die, the man just has to pay a fine. But if the woman were to die, then it's a life for a life sort of situation. So all throughout the Bible, I don't know how you can ground it. I think they use Jeremiah. I knit you in my womb, but he's more so reflecting on what God has done for him. It's not really a passage on whether God designates, life at conception or not. And
so the Bible is not it's not anti-abortion at all then?
No. In fact, so where do evangelicals get this?
Yeah.
In 1968, have you ever heard of Christianity Today? It's probably one of the most popular magazines. It was by Billy Graham himself. It went through all of the Bible, and that at that time they held the position that it was at that first breath is designated life. But it was Bob Jones, the televangelist, who believed that racial segregation was ordained by God. And there was a lawmaker that had just told him that he needed, if he was going to get federal funding for his school, he needed to include people of color. And so that pissed him off. And it was through a radio show, they said, how can we build this platform, this political platform to benefit us? And it was just some random caller that said, what about the topic of abortion? And it was from that moment, a few years after 1968, did you have evangelicals adopt this life starts at conception bullshit. But you can't find that in the Bible anywhere.
Yeah,
Wow.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, and this is, I guess, towards Jenna as the nurse here. So when they say sperm meets egg, they're implying that there's like one little guy that's swimming in there and just finally makes it home, and that's when life begins. Is that anything like how it happens, Jenna?
No. So yes, great question. Are conception and pregnancy the same thing? No, it's not. Conception is exactly what you pretty much said. It's the sperm actually traveling to that egg, and that sperm implants itself in that egg. Once that occurs, once they meet, that is the perceived conception of that potential, birth of that child in the 9 months later. Pregnancy is once that fertilized egg moves through the fallopian tubes to your uterus, implants itself on the uterus lining, and then the cellular, multiplying begins. Yes, thank you. Mitosis begins. All that cellular breakdown and the growth of the cell from an embryo to fetus and all that stuff.
So the cellular mitosis doesn't begin until after embryo implantation into the uterine.
That is correct. Yeah.
I didn't even know that. I knew the first part that they were different. So it was kind of a leading question, but I didn't know that little fact. Is that something that you guys, this is a question for all of you. First of all, besides Jenna, Miyu, did anyone else know that? Okay, so I see two people nodding, two people shaking their head, and one person doing neither. Do you guys think that the majority of the American electorate or the majority of people know that?
No. And I mean, and we covered like a lot of these particular topics in Texas, because Texas is just doing some wild shit. Let's just keep it a buck.
They need to stop.
They really do.
And to be fair, the only reason that I know is because I just went through it. So
yeah. And I mean, like I know that, like, I don't know if, like, I'm just volunteering this information. I have had a miscarriage. So I've had to, and I've wrestled with that whole notion about when I was pregnant, if I was going to have an abortion, because I was no longer with the father. And there was a lot of different, issues that was going on at that particular time. After a while, I decided to have the baby. And once I decided to have the baby, I lost the baby. But once, like, I had to, like, kind of go through, like, all the different doctor visits and going through the ultrasounds and stuff. Like, a lot of this stuff was explained to me, exactly what was going on in my body, when it went from conception to pregnancy. And even to if anybody wants to, like, kind of like back on up with these different truths when it comes to, like, abortion in the Bible, Recovering from Religion has a great article on their website about exactly what the Bible says about abortion, and it's exactly what is opposite of what a lot of these evangelicals espouse, what they think that God says about abortion. And I think it's very telling, specifically with these particular legislatures, when they are formulating these bills, they don't have a clue when it comes to the medical science and how it impacts people when it comes to their health.
They refuse to, privy themselves to that.
No, yeah, I mean, like we just covered like the whole issue concerning like trans people in sports and this particular overarching bill that just got passed through the Texas Senate, banning basically, and that's going to affect mostly trans women from being able to participate in sports. But their ban that they're utilizing is not based in science. It's based completely on their worldview of what they feel should and should not be as far as like what they see, and it's the same issue that's happening here. I'm pretty sure that if they actually consulted with any type of medical professionals concerning this particular topic, they would have got a really big education on exactly what happens when it comes from conception to pregnancy, and also, you know, what could be the impact even medically on these women that you are keeping from being able to do this if it's viable to them.
Speaking of viability, we've heard that term mentioned, and just in case anybody didn't get it, I don't know, I think Sunny or Jenna Miyu might be able to explain this, but for those who are confused, and since I'm about promoting scientific education, what is meant by viability?
Well, do you want to?
My understanding is it just means the ability for the fetus to survive on its own outside of the woman's body. Is that correct as far as you guys understand it?
Yes, that's how I understand it.
Yeah, it's a basic understanding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and when is that at the third trimester? Like, is third trimester like this magic number where something happens, or is it variable? How does that work?
Third trimester, essentially, at that point in time, most of that growing potential baby, all of the organs inside have been developed. Because in the first early stages of the first trimester, is the first thing that kicks off is the nerve activity, your nervous system. Then follows, I think, respiratory or cardiac. I may have switched the two, but that takes subsequently a longer time to develop through that pregnancy. And once you reach that third trimester, for the most part, all of the internal organs have come to some level of full development. So that's why at that point in time, viability is an icebreaker for most people to determine when exactly is viability, and it's always referenced in third trimester. And depending on the range of the pregnancy, that's how people ultimately really make their decisions.
It's kind of an arbitrary guess, right? They had to pick a line, they had to pick a date. It's kind of like how we do age of consent and age of majority, age of drinking, and all that. We just kind of picked a number that seems like it makes sense, and then that's how they do it. I know just from my psychology background, and Sunny might be able to back me up. I believe the third trimester, we don't use this terminology in psychology, but the latter few months is when there's independent brainwave activity as well, where the brain has developed enough to where you can actually get, I don't know if they can take EEG readings at that point from inside the womb, but that's when they believe that independent brain function occurs, which I would argue is where personhood begins. But how do you guys feel about that?
Well, it's important to note that through medical breakthroughs, we've been able to, women have had preemies as early as 24, even 23 weeks, and the child has survived. The biggest problem is with the lungs, because that's the very last thing to fully develop. And so even when you're at 30 weeks, if you go into labor at 30 weeks, they're going to give you medicine to try to speed up the process of the lungs. But they've had, 23, 24 weeks is really the place of viability. But you're correct in that it's the ability to kind of start recognizing things. Like they found babies at in the third trimester, kind of recognizing their own bodies, messing with their toes and their hands in a way that's different from just flailing around. It's like they're actually exploring their bodies, and that's towards the end of the third trimester that the brain is developed in such a way that it's not quite to the point where they recognize that they are different from something else, but just where they're able to recognize things and kind of touch things and recognize that that's a thing. So yeah, and the biggest thing to me though is not necessarily the viability. I mean, it is, but while the fetus is still in the woman, when it gets up to about 24 weeks, fine. We can say what we want about that. People who have females who with a uterus, people who have been born with a uterus who are pregnant at that point, typically by that point they've made the decision that they want to have that baby, and if they're going to terminate that pregnancy, it's because of a serious issue, the health of their life, or the health of the child, where and it's a detrimental, emotionally devastating period in their life. Before that point, that is I don't want to say, I'll offend somebody if I say it's a parasite, because that's not exactly what I mean. But what I do mean is this is the only thing where people are trying to say that a woman's body is being forced to keep another organism alive. We can't even do that to a corpse. We can't take something from a dead person who is still on life support to give to somebody else without that person having given consent prior to being deceased. But a woman, she has less rights than a corpse. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we talk about viability and when we talk about women's bodily autonomy and when we talk about abortion rights. We're talking about a woman who is being forced to use her body in a way where that she doesn't want to in order to keep someone else happy, and I don't mean the embryo or the fetus. They don't have the capability yet to be happy, but to keep someone who is legislating happy. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
I remember once having a debate when I became pro-choice, fully pro-choice. I had a debate with someone who was pro-life, and I asked them the question. It was another man, and I asked them the question: if you had a kid, a son, who had leukemia and needed like a bone marrow transplant or whatever, let's say he needed an organ, like a kidney. That's what it was. And the only match was you would probably, donate your kidney to save your kid. Do you think that there should be a law that makes it mandatory that you must donate your kid? If you have two functioning kidneys and you have a child that needs one and you're a match, you must by law donate your kidney to save that child. And he looked at me like that was the stupidest thing I'd ever asked him. He said, of course not. That's ridiculous. And so I said, so then if the law can't force you to use your body to save your child, why do you think the law should be able to force a woman to use her body to save not even a child yet? And he didn't have an answer for that. But what's that?
It's not even saving a child.
Right. It's not even a child, really.
Yeah.
It's a fetus. It's an embryo according to
a collection of cells.
But,
collection of cells.
And it's not like abortions are fun.
No,
and so I just think that that's a good way to put it. I haven't heard a good comeback to that particular argument, but I don't know. Do you guys think that there's some flaw in that analogy? Because I thought it was a pretty good argument, and you didn't have a good answer for it. But
I don't have a rebuttal for that.
I don't either.
Yeah, and I even want to, and even like another thing concerning these laws is that Texas in itself has extended even. You remember, like we were talking about expenses that could be incurred for raising children, and not always having enough assistance, especially like when it comes to like maybe your income, wheelchair, etc. Texas extended their emergency assistance for Medicaid and SNAP benefits. SNAP are basically food stamps, and it's only until September, at the end of September of this month.
So that's coming soon. This, at the time of this recording, for anyone who's curious, it is September 7th,
Right.
2021. Biddy, do you have any suggestions or advice about how to educate people? It seems like a lot of the evangelical conservative movement is just ignorant on not only the science that we just went over some of it, and what pregnancy is and what conception is and what viability is, but the Bible, which they claim they're getting their beliefs from, but obviously, as you just pointed out, they're not. What is the disconnect here? Why is it that so many Christians and other theists, but mostly Christians in this country, are so wrong? I mean, is it still being promoted? Is there something? Are they not preaching from the Bible? What do you think is going on here?
Well, I think Christianity collectively is so far removed from biblical accuracy or authenticity in the first place. So this kind of just makes sense that this is another thing. I know that I've made a few of, like me and a few other atheist content creators have definitely made what does the Bible say about abortion, TikToks and stuff like that. And usually we get banned, or they fight it. They are not willing to even look at what like it actually says. I mean, in Judaism, they designate life at breath, which is,
birth, right?
Right. And Christianity is like, it needs Judaism in order to even exist as a religion. So I don't know. I don't know. They just don't follow the Bible in many regards. So it's just whatever. It's so political nowadays, like that it doesn't matter really what I say.
If there are any Christians watching that are questioning any of this, don't take what any of us have to say at face value. Be skeptical. I promote skepticism for everybody, for every claim. Read the Bible. Find the passage in the Bible that says do not abort a pregnancy if you can. Or figure out the history of where the doctrine came. Check out Biddy's story, and then see whether or not you still have a good reason for being anti-choice. I'm not even going to call it pro-life. It's not pro-life. It's anti-choice because, as a couple of you mentioned, the same people, they don't care about. Texas supports the death penalty, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So Texas is pro-death penalty. I know a lot of right-wing people are think that we should still be in Afghanistan. I heard a lot of criticism about pulling out of Afghanistan, and they're all Second Amendment. So they're not pro-life.
Weird.
This is like a what do you call it? It's a misnomer, pro-life. Pro-life means you're for living, right? You can't be anti-mask and anti-vax and pro-life at the same time. It doesn't work. So
right.
I think it's anti-choice. But I don't know. Sonny,
and if you're going to be
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you're going to be pro-life, then what the fuck is with these efforts and trying to restrict access to medical, to mental health support, to anything that should be a right in this country for all people, women, men, trans, gay, all of us? Why put so much of a heavy restriction on people actually living their life if you feel life is so important to you?
Yeah. Because I think they care. A lot of people, I can't generalize the entire demographic of people on the right or conservatives or Republicans. I understand people have differences of opinion. There are different reasons for voting the way they do or believing what they do. But a lot of these people, they don't read the Bible, as Biddy just demonstrated. They claim that they're for the Constitution and rights, and they're always talking about rights. I have my right not to do this, that, and the other. But they seem to spend a lot of time kind of trampling or hindering other people from having other kinds of rights. So,
well, and in addition, they are the party that wants the least amount of government, right? And
supposedly,
like, it just
until they want the government to ban abortions, because
Yeah.
that's essentially what they just did. We need to put conservative justices on the court, stop these people from having abortions, and that's pro-government, dude. Like,
Yeah.
that's
They promote small government only when it suits them best. If there is going to be, however, the government can definitely swoop on in like Captain Save him, though, when it comes to being able to push initiatives and policies that they feel benefit them.
But not only that, is now they're paying the public to become these, like,
right. They're
Yeah.
deputizing them.
Well,
They're pretty much essentially giving them the right, the go-to to be like, hey, you're doing something funny. I think it's abortion. I'm gonna sue you. Like,
That's
what?
the same stuff that they were doing in the Soviet Union before it collapsed. It's kind of like KGB arts. If I feel like I'm watching an old movie from James Bond.
Jenna Belk, you were about to say something, I think.
Well, I was just gonna try to play somewhat like devil's advocate because
Please steelman it for us.
Well,
if you
because
can.
I remember being in that position, and I remember that I was one of those, like I mean it, I was one of those obnoxious people that just genuinely believed that this was just the way that things were, and everybody else needed to just get on board or get off. And so, from my perspective, it really wasn't cherry picking. It was literally trying to pick the laws that best followed what I believed God's laws were. And granted, many of us have learned that varies from person to person, not religion to religion even. But again, I thought, well, I have this image in my head of what the right thing is. And even though I was a woman, so that's the thing, I was like, I have a uterus, and I'm still pro-life because I thought that was just what was supposed to be,
You didn't question it at that time.
I was like, no, this is just my role. Granted, that's what I've been told, but I believed it.
Keyword.
Yeah.
This is my role.
This is my role. I totally got triggered. I'm so sorry. Continue.
I'm sorry. No, I know.
You're
I felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did want to ask a final question because we're getting towards the end, although this could go on forever. And I'm happy to let you guys continue talking, but I did want to get the final question in to Sunny, and maybe this will trigger something. I know you had strong opinions on this because we kind of talked about it pre-show, so I figured I might as well just ask you during the show. What would you like biological males or people who don't have a uterus, I'll just put it that way, to consider before, on the pro-life, pro-choice issue, the anti-choice, pro-choice issue? I'll put it that way.
So just as with any marginalized groups, we need those who have privilege to speak up. So we need males, people who don't have a uterus, to speak up in support of women's reproductive rights. We need that. However, just as in other marginalized groups, we also need you to understand when it's time to sit back. We have a voice, and we need to be able to express ourselves. I can never know what it's like to be an Hispanic woman or a Black woman or a Native American woman. All I know is how to be a white woman. That's the only lens that I can. So I can't speak for the people of color experience. I can be an ally, and I can ask, what can I do to assist you? But then I have to sit back and shut up when it's time, so that they can speak up. And I want men to people without a uterus to understand the same thing about this issue. Too often, men are having this discussion. Too often, men are debating. Too often, men are legislating what happens to women. And even the men or those without a uterus who support us sometimes inadvertently, not intending to, but inadvertently talk over us. And I don't mean that like they ignore us or they beat us down. I don't mean it in that way. But what I do mean is that sometimes we don't always need a savior in a moment. We need to be lifted. We do need to be lifted, but we also need to be empowered. And that means giving us the power, the voice at times, if that makes sense. And I don't want to offend anyone because I know that this is a difficult thing, especially for many males to grasp. It's not something that's easy, just like it's not easy for white feminist women to understand that they don't need to be the savior for our women of color. It's a hard thing to understand, but it is an important thing to understand. And it's a skill that we need to learn. We all need to learn it in one aspect or another. But that's what I would like our biological males to consider.
Yeah, and I have to say that even applies to me. The last thing that you just said, how it's there's a learning curve going on even with me, because sometimes I think, man, I should really chime in on this. I've got some really important input to add. And then I have to remind myself, dude, shut the fuck up. Like the women, the people who have uteruses, we are allowed to just hear from people who have uteruses sometimes, So it's a hard thing when you want to be an ally.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure out, you have to take your cues from the people who are in charge, which are the people you're an ally of, So the ally can't be making the decisions and calling the shots and explaining I got accused of mansplaining the other day. And it really upset me because it was not accurate in this particular case, but it did make me think, how often do I do that? So it's just, it's something to think about. But before I give everyone final words, we do have a special guest that's backstage right now. And I think he wanted to say hi. So I'm going to give him the opportunity to say hello to all of you on air. And I'm just stalling right now until he decides to come on. And let's see, there he is. He's in audio. So actually, let me pull myself out and then bring him on, because I think he wants to have something to say.
No, you don't need to go anywhere.
Okay, fair enough.
Hey,
there he is, the man.
Hi.
Hello, ladies.
Hey, I'm here.
That sounded like Charlie's Angels for a moment there.
right.
All right, Bryce. What's up, brother? How are you guys? Great conversation, great episode.
I think so.
Needed.
Yes,
Very needed.
Absolutely.
very needed.
Yeah.
Bryce has been teeing up all the good content lately.
Have I?
Oh, yeah.
I gotta say, this was the best though. Like I don't know. I'm pretty proud of myself. Just the fact that I was able to get all of these great minds here. I had nothing to do with it other than initiating a communication. So it was all the great minds are everyone on the panel, but I'm proud that I was able to get these minds here because I felt like each one of you were hand selected by me, first choice, and I didn't think I thought I might get like one or two of you. I did not think I was gonna get all five of you at the same time. So I was about to say stoked, but I think Aunt Kathy hates that word, so I won't say that. But yeah, really happy. Generated
Stoked.
What's that?
I was stoked.
Yeah. So what's going on in the land of Oz?
We postponed Better.
Hmm.
That's the biggest news I have right now. So May 6th, 7th, and 8th, still be in Fort Wayne. But yeah, we're doing the right thing with spike in COVID new cases and everything again. Like we said last night, sometimes doing the right thing sucks, but doing the right thing is doing the right thing. And we're protecting the people involved and our communities as well. So.
Right. So do me a favor, repeat the new dates again for those who may not have heard.
It will be May 6th, 7th, and 8th in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay. So same location, same venue, and everything, and all of that, right?
Yeah, venue and everything is paid in full. That was expensive, but it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
That wouldn't hurt. You know, like whether it's your day-to-day life or business or whatever, there's some checks that you write and it just fucking hurts when you're writing the check. That one was like, ugh. But it's there. It's done.
Right on. So I'm looking forward to that. I know Cynthia is looking forward to that. We should have some stimulating conversation there, piggybacking on our why Black people are still Christians. But there's a lot to talk about. Sonny, I think you were gonna be there, or?
Yep, I will be there.
Okay,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
And Biddy probably too.
Hell yeah.
All right. So good. So you get to see quite a few of us when we actually do put it on. Jenna Belk, what do you have new on the horizons? What can we expect from you? You are back at Atheist Experience and producing regular content over there, which we love.
Thank you. It's definitely fun doing that. I'm definitely looking at getting more involved in shows again. This guy kind of put a damper on things, but not too bad. I think I've still been able to do stuff like this every now and then. So I guess you'll just catch me floating around here and there, but I will let you know when I'm back all the way for sure.
Okay. Are you still on the Ethan and Jenna show, or is that on hiatus, or?
So actually, I think today is our year anniversary of it starting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It has been on a hiatus for about 3 months, and probably will be for maybe another month or two. But we really want to get that one going again. That's probably my highest priority out of all my shows, to get that one going again.
Yeah, because mental health is the most neglected aspect of health, and it's the least discussed and the most stigmatized and the least known about. And we need shows like that to where people can become comfortable talking about mental health issues and normalizing it and destigmatizing it. So we appreciate what you and Ethan, Michael are doing over there. Jenna, Miyu, and Cynthia McDonald, our non-profits. What do you guys have coming up?
Well, I'm about to go to Hawaii starting tomorrow morning.
Oh, now is Hawaii back open?
I guess so. Well, it was one of the, those few that we decided that we're comfortable with, my sister, myself, and my mom. But this was a accredited trip because we were initially, last year in May, were trying to do a trip to DC, but COVID happened, obviously, and so that was canceled. And we had until the end of this year to utilize that credit. So we're like, Hawaii, there you go. So, but I've been working feverishly with my own personal content as far as addressing normalizing Black atheism. As far as I did do a recording with Normalizing Atheism channel on my perspective, I guess you could say, on Black atheism. And with the channel, I'm going to be starting myself fairly soon. I've recently done 2 pre-recorded conversations with people that most of us may or may not be familiar with. So I'm just working along with the good old Pasta Mike on editing all that and getting that out. And of course, I also every Thursday still do International Free Thinkers with my friend Justin. We have that going every Thursday evenings, and of course still with the nonprofits too. So all my busy selfness in the midst of everything. I'm all over the place. Going on. Yeah. And I'm nice. There you go.
So yeah, same with Jenna specifically. I'm not going to Hawaii, but I can definitely support your decision to go to Hawaii and wish it were me. Regardless of that, I still doing the nonprofits. That's most video content that I'm doing right now. I know that my show that I was doing previously. The 13%, we put that on hiatus until next year. So hopefully next January will be myself and my partner, Arthur Ward, the self-proclaimed Pope of Atheism, will be able to go ahead and re-debut that show. So we're looking forward to that. And also, I still kind of like hop into other streams from time to time. And even though we got to wait until next year to do better. And by the way, that is my birthday month. So just putting it out there. Then exactly.
That's the real reason we postponed.
I know. I felt that in the ether. But I am also scheduled to speak at the Women of Color Beyond Belief conference in my home city, hosted by the Black Non-Believers. So that would be, I believe, the weekend of Don't Get Me to Lying. Where is a calendar when you need it? Good grief. Yeah, it's going to be the weekend of the September 24th, 25th, and 26th, I believe. So, folk, if you are in Chicago, please come on by. The venue will be practicing safety protocols for COVID. Please know that. And I think there's a virtual option. I'm not sure. But if you check out the Women of Color Beyond Belief invite, website, etc., I believe that all the information, if one wants to attend, will be there. So, yeah.
I have to give a shout out to Secular Rarity, who was a huge fan of this show. Jenna Belk had to leave. She obviously has other things going on, but we appreciate her being on the show. And I appreciate the $10 donation from Secular Rarity. So I have you guys to thank for that. And Biddy, I know that I can look forward to seeing you on Tang Live Call-ins, but anything else going on? Or
yeah, I don't know why Oz hasn't been promoting it unless he forgot, but we are supposed to be getting shit-faced on the Whiskey, Scotch, and Cigar show on Friday with Dave Warnock.
I did forget.
I thought you did. Are you
Now's-
still on, hopefully?
There you go. So no, what is it? Whiskey, Scotch,
And cigars.
Cigars.
Whiskey and Scotch, or whiskey or Scotch?
And
All of it.
Well, Scotch is kind of a whiskey anyway, isn't it?
it doesn't matter, just all of it.
Okay, gotcha.
I like to do like frozen like daiquiris. I'm kind of cheating when I'm on the show, but
Yeah.
It's alcohol. It's all good.
right?
The first one Biddy did with us, she accidentally got shit-faced. It was pretty funny.
Shane the Skeptic's got jokes.
Always done shit.
Or he's serious. I don't know.
Shane.
Hard to tell with him sometimes, but there was your response, Shane. And Sunny Shell, my partner in crime here, and also over at the Promethean Secular Frontier. What have you got coming up, and what are you going to be a part of? You're back in the mix now.
I'm back now. We were closing on my house and moving and all kinds of stuff. So I'm so glad to be back. Every Monday night, I'm on the Crucible on PSF with Trent. And so check that out. We do, it's more science-based, secular science-based, which is awesome. And it gives me a chance to stretch my psychology wings a little more in this. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I use psychology every day in my job too, but this gives me a chance to do it in a different way. Yep. And then I get to co-host often with Bryce on several. He has shows everywhere. I mean, my goodness. And so
I don't know about everywhere, but
we get to do all kinds of cool stuff there. So I'm either on Tang or I'm on PSF, and working behind the scenes on some shows. So I may not even be on screen. Sometimes I'd produce.
Yeah. You do a lot of stuff. Sunny does more different jobs in this than anyone I know. She does producing, she does co-hosting, she appears as a guest, she organizes the legal shenanigans of our better events and gives us all kinds of advice, we'd be kind of lost without saying.
Yeah, they're silly. Yeah, and then all of a sudden everything stopped because I was like living in a storage building waiting for my house to finish being built. But now I'm back, so I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to meeting more guests and working with more people, because tonight was just fantastic. I've not been able to work with either of the Jennas or with Cynthia, and I was really looking forward to this when I found out they were going to be on. I was like, oh my gosh, I've hit the big leagues now.
Oh.
Yes. So, all right, cool. Any final thoughts, Oz?
Yes, thank you. Because now I feel like an idiot for forgetting whiskey, scotch, and cigars. So as soon as that happened, a couple other things popped in my head. Thank you, Biddy. So Thursday at 2:00, Aunt Kathy has her regular episode in the afternoon, and she's going to start going through talking about deconstruction. What does it look like? What does it feel like? All those things. The one I'm really excited about on the 15th, that Wednesday, she's going to move that one back to 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to be on with Aunt Kathy, but that's not why it's special. It's going to be her and her daughter, and her daughter came out as atheist non-believer a while ago, and there was a lot of separation and distance between her daughter and her because of the extreme form of religion, Christianity we were in, and now with both of them being there, it's dynamic to see and hear them communicate. And I'm going to play, and it's going to sound funny, and I know a lot of people don't like this guy, but it's going to be the kind of the interview, the open-ended questions, like trying to dig into the emotions and everything, going through all that. But I'm kind of play the Dr. Phil role, where it's like, okay, how did that make you feel? Okay, how did that make you feel? And going through that kind of thing. And I think that's at least for me anyway, that's all of the hours of atheist YouTube I've watched. I've never seen that dynamic, to where you get to see a mother and a daughter be open and candid about the hurt, about the, whether she felt lied to or, whatever it was. And the fact that I get to help ask the questions, I'm pretty excited about that. So put it on your calendar. That one's going to be awesome.
I want to watch that for sure.
Yeah, me too. I will definitely stay tuned. But as we've come to the conclusion of this show, this wonderful show, I think one of my best, and I have only the guests to thank for that. Shout out to Jenna Belk. She had to dip out, but great having her. Great having all of the guests, Jenna, Cynthia, Sunny, and Biddy. I really appreciate all of you. You are all welcome back on this show anytime. Just drop me a line when you think you've got something important to talk about, and I will write a show about it, and we will do a show on it.
Thank you, Bryce.
I would like to.
Feels nice to be handpicked and chosen.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to thank everybody who participated in the chat as well, and everyone who donated in super chats, and Shane for throwing us some comic relief and trading blows with Biddy. It's like the brother and sister act on and off screen. And there's Aunt Kathy. Yep. So that I say thank you to everyone. We have links to everyone's social media in the description below. So if you want to see more of either Jenna, we have links to Atheist Experience and the nonprofits. We have links to Tang if you want to see more of Biddy stuff and more of Sunny stuff and more of Oz. And so you can find all of us. Just look in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Tang. You can catch my show, The Bryce is Right, Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for Oz, producer Wes, who's doing all of his magic in the background, and Sunny Shell, my name is Brycearonee. Have a good morning, a good afternoon, and a good night. I'll see you next time on The Bryce is Right.